My two 7-year-old sister ignored our dying father, but when I inherited $168K along with her, she sued me to take my share. The judge discovered her financial secret and destroyed her in court, leaving her with nothing. I'm 17 years old, finishing my last year of high school, and honestly, I need to tell this story because what my sister did after my dad died was so twisted that I still have trouble believing it. I guess I should start by saying that my sister Vanessa, who's 27, like 10 years older than me, has always been complicated, the type of person who needs to control everything and everyone around her. For as long as I can remember, she's had problems with our Aunt Marie, my dad's sister, and I never really understood why until all of this happened. Aunt Marie was always cool with me. She helped me with homework when I was little, took me to the movies, normal stuff that aunts do. But Vanessa hated her, literally hated her. And every time Aunt Marie came to the house, Vanessa would find some excuse to leave or start an argument about any stupid thing. The thing is that everything started going to hell when I was in my junior year of high school. Like, about a year and a half ago. My dad started having heart problems. Nothing too serious at first, just that he got tired easily and the doctor told him he had to take better care of himself, reduce stress and stuff like that. I was living with him at that time. Vanessa had married Gregory like 3 years before and they lived in their own house across town. And honestly, I didn't see her much. Maybe once a month, if that. When my dad started getting worse, like he couldn't climb the stairs without running out of breath, Aunt Marie started coming over more often to help us. She cooked, cleaned, made sure my dad took his medicines, basically became his primary caregiver, because I had to go to school and obviously couldn't do everything alone. We texted Vanessa constantly to keep her updated, like, "Hey, Dad had to go to the doctor today," or "Dad is having more trouble breathing," and she always responded with super generic things like, "Oh no, that's terrible," or "Let me know if you need anything." But she never came. Never. Called my dad to ask how he was. Nothing. Things got really bad. One afternoon when I got home from school and found my dad lying on the living room floor, I got so scared. I mean, I thought he was dead, but he was still breathing, just very weak. I called 911 and Aunt Marie, and she got there before the ambulance even. I don't know how she drove so fast. They took him to the hospital, and it turns out he'd had a pretty serious cardiac episode. The doctors said his heart was very weak, and that basically anything could happen at any moment. That night I called Vanessa like 5 times, sent her messages, left her voicemails explaining that Dad was in the hospital and it was serious, that she needed to come. And you know how long it took her to respond? 2 weeks. 2 damn weeks, while my dad was going in and out of the hospital, and she didn't show up once, didn't call, didn't send flowers, nothing. When she finally responded, it was with a message that said, "Sorry, Gregory has been super sick and I haven't been able to leave the house." Gregory, her husband, was always sick with something, always had some chronic condition that required constant attention according to Vanessa, and that was always her excuse for everything. My dad died on a Tuesday night, around 11, and I was there with Aunt Marie, holding his hand when he passed. It was horrible. Like, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And Aunt Marie was crying so hard she could barely stay standing, but she kept telling my dad that she loved him and that everything was going to be okay, even though obviously nothing was ever going to be okay again. We waited like 2 hours before calling Vanessa because honestly we didn't know what to say to her. And when I finally called her and told her dad had died, she just said, "Oh," and was quiet for like 10 seconds, and then asked, "So what do we do now?" She didn't say "I'm sorry," didn't ask if I was okay, didn't ask any details about what had happened, just, "So, what do we do now?" Like we were talking about what to have for dinner. The funeral was like 5 days later, and guess who didn't show up? Yeah, Vanessa. She said Gregory was too sick for her to leave him alone, that she was so sorry but she couldn't risk something happening to him while she wasn't there. I was so angry I didn't even respond to her. Aunt Marie was the one who sent her a message saying it was unacceptable that she wasn't coming to her own father's funeral. But Vanessa never answered. At the funeral, it was basically me, Aunt Marie, some of my dad's friends from work, and some distant cousins I barely knew. It was depressing. Honestly, seeing how empty the funeral home was. And I kept thinking that my dad deserved better than this. Deserved his oldest daughter to be there. But well, that's how things are, I guess. A week after the funeral, we had to go to my dad's lawyer's office, Mr. Parker, for the reading of the will. Vanessa did show up to that one. What a surprise! And she arrived with Gregory, who looked perfectly fine for someone who was supposedly so sick that his wife couldn't go to her father's funeral. Mr. Parker had us sit down and started explaining that my dad had left everything divided 50/50 between Vanessa and me. Like the house, his savings, his life insurance, everything was going to be half and half. But here comes the important part. Since I was a minor, Aunt Marie was going to be the custodian of my part of the inheritance until I turned 18, which would be in like 8 months because my birthday is in September. I saw the look on Vanessa's face when Mr. Parker said that, and I swear I'd never seen anyone so furious. Like, her eyes literally narrowed and she clenched her fists on the table. Gregory put his hand on her shoulder like to calm her down, but she shook it off. She didn't say anything there in the office, but I knew there was going to be trouble. And of course there was. Like 2 weeks after the will reading, Vanessa started calling me, like every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. At first it was like, "Hey, just wanted to see how you're doing. I know this has been hard for you," playing the concerned sister, but then she started bringing up the money. She'd say things like, "Have you thought about what you're going to do with your part of the inheritance? And Aunt Marie isn't very good at managing money, did you know that?" Trying to plant doubts in my head about her. I told her I didn't care, that I trusted Aunt Marie, and that besides the money was there for my college, that I want to study medicine and that costs a ton. Vanessa then changed tactics and started telling me about Gregory, about how he was really sick and needed a super expensive surgery that his insurance didn't cover, and that if I could lend her some of my inheritance just for a while, she'd pay me back with interest when Gregory recovered and went back to work. I said no, obviously, because 1, it wasn't my decision. Aunt Marie was the custodian. And 2, even if it was my decision, I'd still say no, because it sounded super suspicious. That's when Vanessa started getting really nasty. She began calling other family members, cousins, aunts and uncles, people I didn't even know existed, telling them her version of the story where Aunt Marie was manipulating me and controlling my money for her own benefit, and where she, the concerned older sister, just wanted to protect me. Some relatives called me asking if I was okay, if Aunt Marie was treating me badly, and I had to explain to them that no, everything was perfectly fine, that Vanessa was lying. Aunt Marie was super stressed with all this. She's an elementary school teacher and doesn't need this kind of drama in her life, but she held on because she knew it was important to protect my inheritance. Vanessa also started sending me horrible messages, like, "You're a selfish kid. Dad would be disappointed in you. Your sister needs help, and you ignore her." Stuff like that made me feel guilty, even though I knew she was wrong. But wait, because it gets worse. Like 3 months after my dad died, we got a legal notification. Vanessa was suing to have custody of my inheritance taken away from Aunt Marie and given to her. The lawsuit said that Aunt Marie was financially incompetent and had malicious intentions toward my money, and that, since Vanessa was my only sister and close relative, she should be my legal guardian until I turned 18. I couldn't believe it. I mean, seriously? Was she so desperate for money that she was going to do this? Aunt Marie hired a lawyer immediately. Mr. Parker recommended someone good to us, and we started preparing for the court case. The lawyer told us we had a good chance of winning because my dad's will was very clear and because there was no real evidence that Aunt Marie had done anything wrong. But I was still scared. Like, what if the judge believed Vanessa? What if I ended up losing all the money my dad had saved for my education? The next few months were a total nightmare. Vanessa wouldn't stop harassing Aunt Marie. She sent her threatening messages saying she was going to destroy her reputation, that she was going to make sure she could never work as a teacher again. Super intense and scary stuff. She also sent me messages trying to convince me to testify in her favor, telling me that if I told the judge I wanted her to be my guardian, then we'd win the case easily and she could help Gregory and then save the rest of the money for me. I told her no way, that I was going to testify in favor of Aunt Marie because she was the one who had been there for me and for my dad. And Vanessa responded with something like, "You're going to regret this. I promise you." I saved all those messages. The lawyer told us they were important evidence. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived, and let me tell you, it was one of the most surreal days of my life. We were all there, me, Aunt Marie, our lawyer, Vanessa, Gregory, and Vanessa's lawyer, who looked super expensive with his fancy suit and leather briefcase. The judge was an older woman who looked pretty serious, and she started by asking Vanessa to explain why she thought she should be my guardian instead of Aunt Marie. Vanessa started with this super rehearsed speech about how she loved me so much and just wanted what was best for me, about how Aunt Marie had manipulated my dad into making her the custodian when he was sick and vulnerable, and about how she was afraid Aunt Marie would spend all my money. It was hard not to interrupt her and yell that she was a liar, but our lawyer had told me to stay quiet until it was my turn to speak. Then it was our lawyer's turn, and this is where things got interesting. He presented Vanessa's bank records from the last 6 months, since she'd received her part of the inheritance. Turns out Vanessa had literally spent all her money. And when I say all, I mean all of it. Her part of the inheritance was like $175,000, and in 6 months, she'd blown through it completely. What did she spend it on? A new car, a BMW that cost like $65,000, on designer clothes, on expensive furniture for her house, on vacations, on jewelry, basically all luxury stuff she didn't need. The lawyer showed the statements one by one, and you could see Vanessa's face getting redder and redder as he read each purchase out loud. The judge asked her directly, "What happened to your husband's surgery? Didn't you say you needed the money for that?" And Vanessa went quiet, didn't know what to say, and her lawyer tried to intervene, but the judge shut him down and said she wanted to hear Vanessa's answer. Finally, Vanessa mumbled something about how they decided to postpone the surgery, that it wasn't as urgent as they thought. Our lawyer also presented all the text messages and voicemails that Vanessa had sent me during those months. They played some of the voicemails in court, and it was horrible, hearing her voice filled with rage, telling me I was selfish, that I was a bad brother, that I'd regret betraying her. In one of the messages, which the lawyer had them read in full, Vanessa said literally, "If you don't give me that money, you're going to lose a lot more than just money. I guarantee it." Which sounded pretty threatening when you hear it in a courtroom in front of a judge. They also showed the messages she'd sent to Aunt Marie, some of which were worse, like, "You're a manipulative old woman, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you really are." Stuff like that. The judge looked increasingly annoyed as she reviewed all the evidence. Then it was my turn to testify. I was super nervous. I'd never spoken in front of a judge before, and my hands were shaking when I put my hand on the Bible to swear. The lawyer asked me basic questions at first, like, what was my relationship with Aunt Marie? Like, if I felt safe living with her, if I had any concerns about how she handled my money. I told him the truth, that Aunt Marie was amazing, that she took good care of me, that she helped me with my homework, that she cooked for me, that she took me to my activities, basically everything a good guardian does. I told him I had no concerns about the money because I knew she was saving it for my college and that she showed me the account statements every month, so I knew exactly how much there was. Then he asked me about Vanessa, about what our relationship had been like before and after my dad's death. This is where I got emotional. I couldn't help it, and I had to stop for a moment to breathe before continuing to talk. I told the judge everything. How Vanessa never visited my dad when he was sick. How she didn't come to the hospital when he had the cardiac episode. How she didn't show up at the funeral. And how she only became interested in me when she found out I had money. I told him I knew perfectly well why Vanessa wanted to be my guardian. And it wasn't because she cared about my well-being. It was because she'd spent all her money and now she wanted mine. Vanessa's lawyer tried to object several times, saying I was speculating, but the judge told him to let me finish. When I finished testifying, I felt exhausted, like emotionally drained, and Aunt Marie grabbed my hand when I sat back down and squeezed it to comfort me. I saw Vanessa looking at me with a face I can't even describe. It was like pure hatred, and Gregory was whispering something in her ear, but she was completely ignoring him. The judge took like 20 minutes to review all the documents and evidence that had been presented, and the courtroom was so quiet you could hear people breathing. Finally, the judge started speaking, and basically said she'd never seen such a clear case of financial motivation and manipulation. She said it was obvious that Vanessa had irresponsibly spent her inheritance, and now wanted access to her minor brother's money to cover her bad financial decisions. She said the messages and calls Vanessa had made constituted harassment and intimidation, and that there was absolutely no evidence that Aunt Marie had done anything inappropriate with the money. Vanessa's petition was completely rejected, and the judge also ordered that Vanessa be investigated for perjury and possible fraud because she had lied in her lawsuit about several things, including Gregory's surgery. Vanessa stood up and started yelling that this was unfair, that the system was against her, and her lawyer had to calm her down and make her sit before they charged her with contempt of court. But wait, there's still more. The judge also asked our lawyer if we wanted to request a restraining order against Vanessa to protect me from harassment, and our lawyer said yes. The judge approved a temporary restraining order that prohibited Vanessa from contacting me directly or indirectly by any means, and said that if she violated the order, she would be arrested immediately. Vanessa was crying at that point, but they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of rage, and she kept muttering things about how this wasn't going to stay like this, and about how we were going to pay for this. Gregory finally grabbed her by the arm and took her out of the courtroom before she said something that would get her in more trouble. The following weeks were weird. Vanessa was found guilty of perjury after they investigated her case, and she had to pay a large fine. I don't remember exactly how much, but it was substantial. She was also sentenced to mandatory therapy for a year, something about anger management and financial counseling, and the restraining order was made permanent until I turned 21. I haven't heard anything from her since then, like zero contact, although I heard from other relatives that she and Gregory moved to another state. I guess to start over, or to escape the embarrassment of everything that happened. Some relatives are. Still, on Vanessa's side, they think that me and Aunt Marie were too hard on her, and that she was just going through a rough time, but most of the people who matter understand what really happened and support us. I turned 18 inches September, like 2 months ago, and Aunt Marie officially transferred full control of my inheritance to me. There's like $168,000 there. My dad really did a good job saving, and the money grew a bit with the investments Aunt Marie made. I'm applying to colleges right now. I want to study medicine, like I said, and knowing I have this money for college makes everything less stressful. Aunt Marie says I can stay with her as long as I want, even during college breaks if I want. And honestly, I can't imagine living anywhere else. She's basically my mom now, although we'd never say that out loud. Sometimes I think about Vanessa and wonder what happened. Like, how did she get to be like this? She wasn't always so horrible. When I was little, she played with me sometimes, bought me ice cream, normal older sister stuff. But something changed in her. I don't know if it was when she married Gregory or if she was always like this, and I was too young to realize it. The truth is, I don't feel like I miss her. I feel like the sister I knew doesn't exist anymore, and the person she became isn't someone I want to have a relationship with. Aunt Marie says maybe someday Vanessa will apologize and try to fix things. But I don't know. I don't think that's going to happen. And honestly, I'm not sure I'd forgive her even if she did. What she tried to do to me was unforgivable. She tried to steal the last gift my dad left me, and that's not something you can just forget or get over. Yesterday, I was organizing some of my dad's things that I still have in my room. Old photos, his reading glasses, a mug he used for coffee, things I kept because they remind me of him. I found a letter he wrote me like a year before he died, when he was still relatively healthy. I didn't know it existed. It was inside one of his favorite books. In the letter, he told me he was proud of me, that he knew I was going to do great things with my life, and that no matter what happened, he would always take care of me. There was also a part where he mentioned Aunt Marie, saying that if anything happened to him, he trusted that she would take good care of me because she was one of the few people in the world he trusted completely. I cried when I read that. I couldn't help it, because my dad knew. Somehow he knew that Aunt Marie was the right person to take care of me. I wonder if he also knew something about Vanessa, if he had any idea she'd do what she did, but I guess I'll never know. What I do know is that my dad made the right decision, and that thanks to him and Aunt Marie, I have a future. I have a chance to fulfill my dreams without having to worry about money or greedy sisters who want to take what was left to me, and that's enough for now, I guess.